Hey folks, coming at you from my couch in my apartment in Japan is my new show called Unpopular Opinions, where I share my opinions with you and continue to be unpopular. For my first episode, I want to talk about one of the most popular game franchises in human history, The Legend of Zelda. In this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank all of the canon timeline Zelda games from very worst to very best. Before I start, I want to remind us all that these are my opinions. And we all have our own opinions, and we're all entitled to those opinions. And for me, coming from a film background, I've always found that if a game has a really immersive, strong story, I'm typically a little bit more lenient when it comes to some of the gameplay that might be a little iffy here and there. So, without further ado, let's get started. Coming up dead last is going to be Four Swords. My oldest brother put it best. This game is kind of like a mobile game with mushy controls that doesn't actually feel at all like a Zelda game. And beyond the fact that it doesn't feel as tight as you would expect from a Zelda game, it's just frustrating. It's the only game in the entire franchise that I haven't completed, but that's because I couldn't get four fucking people together for long enough to complete it without us all killing each other. In my coveted 18th place pick is Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages. Now, I know this is an unpopular opinion because most people prefer Oracle of Ages over Oracle of Seasons, but Oracle of Ages doesn't even have a unique mechanic to redeem itself from being an unfun game. Oracle of Ages has some truly unredeemable moments. Take, for example, trying to navigate Rolling Ridge. That place is a motherfucking nightmare. The boss of the second dungeon, you know, the spinning thwomp with different faces on each side that you have to throw bombs in the top of and hope that it lands on the red face. By the time you've thrown your third bomb in the top of it, it's spinning so fucking fast you can't even see what's going on anymore. But I think the perfect example of a moment in the game that is truly unforgivable is the moment when you're stranded on Crescent Island and a bunch of frog people take all of the equipment that you've earned throughout the game and scatter it throughout the island. And then they only allow you to have one of your items back at any given time to go and solve puzzles to get your own fucking shit back. It's so much fun!
It's so much fucking fun!
And definitely not a cheap attempt to increase the playtime of the game, right? This probably doesn't come as a surprise, but in the 17th place is Oracle of Seasons. The reason this lands itself above Oracle of Ages for me, Oracle of Ages has going from the past and going to the future, which we've seen in about 1 million Zelda games. Oracle of Seasons has a rod where you change the seasons from winter to spring, and if you don't know the seasons, fall and summer. At the very least, it's got this unique mechanic pulling it together, and it allows you to traverse the overworld in ways that are reliant on the seasons, and that is, at the very least, kind of interesting. But the Oracle games fall into the same trap, trying to make the game longer than it needs to be. Let's take, for example, the ring system. There are like 1 billion rings in each of these games, most of which don't even do anything for you. Why do I have any incentive to collect these rings or like chop down 100 signs? Is that supposed to be fun? The game that came prior, Link's Awakening, was a short, sweet, 10 to 12 hour game. If you're a completionist, you could complete it to 100%. Capcom looked at that and thought, you know what would be better? If we put a bunch of random garbage in this game to make it so you could play this game for hours on end and achieve pretty much nothing. In the 16th spot comes Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures, for all intents and purposes, is kind of a fun game, except they add this competition element to it, some absolutely pointless and worthless point system, force gems, that makes it so you're kind of at odds with whoever you're playing with at any given moment. Like throwing your friend into another friend just so they drop all of their force gems, or catching them on fire and then collecting their force gems, doesn't make you like your friends. Like, why not just have one collective force gem thing and you're collecting them together? That would make it at least more co-op-y. It's supposed to be a co-op game, but it felt more like a I never want to talk to my older brothers again kind of game, or like a I'm gonna pack my bags and move to Japan across the globe kind of game. In my 15th spot comes Spirit Tracks. This is kind of a tough one for me because growing up, I was always a fan of model trains. Mixing two of my favorite things, Legend of Zelda and trains, seems like it would be like a recipe for greatness. But the biggest pitfall of this game is the train travel itself. It's boring. You just set a course from one place to the next. You have to try and avoid these ghost trains that chase after you at the speed of fucking light and kill you in one instant only to set you back all the way to where you started. And then there are fetch quests like trying to bring blocks of ice from one place to another before they melt. It's just a good way to get your anxiety levels up. In the end, this game does have some really strong points, having Ghost Zelda as one of the greatest companions in the entire series, and there are some really great characters, and it's a good time. It's not a bad game. I enjoyed it. I guess I just wish that you could explore the overworld more. But as it is, you just go from one town to the next town to the next town. And it doesn't even feel like there is an overworld in this game. And it really makes the difference. Number 14 for me is Phantom Hourglass. There are some things about this game that really just seemed like an odd choice. The Ocean King's temple is actually, in and of itself, a really good temple with really great puzzles, and it's very clever. If it were just like the last dungeon in the game. But it's not. You have to go back however many times in the game and solve a bunch of the same puzzles over again, when in reality it would have just made a much better final dungeon. A big, long, packed final dungeon, but it didn't. And also there are like these genocidal fucking maniacs. And for that, it's gonna have to go kind of low mid-range on my list, unfortunately. And another incredibly unpopular opinion, number 13, is Triforce Heroes. Now, despite the fact that all of these are in one franchise and they all have the Legend of Zelda name on it, they're all different games. It's important to recognize how a game is supposed to be played. This is called Triforce Heroes, and it's a 3-player co-op game that you're supposed to play with 3 players. This game is honestly a lot of fun. If you're playing it with 2 other people on your 3DSs, it's just like a good, fun time. And sure, it's not gonna hold up to a game like Wind Waker, but why would you compare it to Wind Waker? If you're gonna compare Triforce Heroes to anything, compare it to the other multiplayer games in the series. And if I'm gonna compare it to those two, the mechanics were better, the puzzles were a lot more fun. I'm gonna go ahead and say it's leagues better than Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures. Coming up next is Zelda 1, the first game in the series, the one that started it all. Honestly, credit where credit's due. You'll see a lot of people online say that this game doesn't hold up very well, but I disagree. I think this game holds up great. And if you don't believe me, go onto your Switch's NES emulator and pick an NES game at random, and tell me it's not a terrible time to play. There are only a handful of NES games that truly stand the test of time, and the ones that do are the Mario games and the Zelda games. This game holds up, and it's the basis for Breath of the Wild. This is what they based Breath of the Wild off of. So if you don't give it at least that credit... Right in the middle at number 11 is gonna be Minish Cap. So I'm a big fan of Game Boy Advance era pixel art, and I think Minish Cap has some of the best there is. Especially when you become tiny and you hang out with the Picori in like the rafters of inns and taverns and stuff, and they're hanging out on books with candles for lights and cheese and shit. That shit fucking kills me, dude.
So fucking cute!
But I think where this game lacks, it doesn't feel as polished and tight as the main Nintendo-made Zelda games. I played Minish Cap immediately after playing A Link Between Worlds, and I noticed a huge difference in how tight the controls felt, in how tight the pacing was of each of those games. There is something that feels a little bit mushy about Minish Cap. Like you're controlling Link through vats of pudding, and I don't know. It's an amazing game. I love Minish Cap. I binged the game in like 2 or 3 days, so I really have very few complaints. It doesn't have that Nintendo polish that I feel a lot of the other 2D Zelda games do. Coming up at number 10 is Zelda II, The Adventure of Link. I actually love this game. I remember watching my older brothers play this game when I was a kid. I remember this moment when the middle brother erased our oldest brother's save file for Zelda 2. and it created this whole family debacle. But beyond my nostalgia for this game, I honestly think that Zelda 2 is the most unjustly hated and reviled game in the series. The number one argument you'll hear against this game time and time again is that it breaks away from the Zelda formula. It's the second game in the series. What fucking formula? It's the second game in a series which does its best to do something different every single game, and that's what makes them good. If you think of Zelda 2's side-scrolling mechanics and the RPG elements that everyone hates so much as Zelda 2's unique mechanic, the same way you'd think of sailing in Wind Waker or turning into a wolf in Twilight Princess as their own unique mechanics, Zelda 2 is actually a fucking kick-ass game. This game introduces so much into the series that would return time and time again in future Zelda games. The magic meter, explorable caves, talking to people in towns so you can get clues about the overworld, fucking Dark Link. The one thing that always gets me coming back to Zelda 2 is the sword combat system. Think about this for a second. A Link to the Past has a less complex sword combat system than Zelda 2. In Zelda 2, there's the downward thrust, the upward thrust, you can hit high, down low, you can jump and time your swipe on the way down to hit an enemy on the head who's blocking with his shield.
Wow.
When you finally do really learn your way around it, it's one of the most satisfying combat experiences in a Zelda game. I think people need to give it another go. Next on this list is Twilight Princess, and I want to love this game. I really do. I just don't. I can't quite put my finger on this game. It's really weird, because it's got some series bests and some series worsts. Let me give you a couple of examples to explain what I'm talking about. Characters. Midna, series best companion. Ganon, completely uninteresting. Just kind of shows up at the end to remind you that you're playing a Zelda game. Link is an emotionless douchebag. Zelda, what does she even do in the game other than act as a placeholder for someone that you need to help? Next example would be dungeons. Snow Peak Temple, one of the best in the series. Temple of Time, truly amazing. Lake Bed Temple, City in the Sky, series worst. Like, there's really nothing like putting on your iron boots and walking at the speed of shit backwards up a spiral water fountain, or hanging for 15 minutes and waiting for a spinning grate in the land of whatever these blue-titted nightmares are. But I think the thing that this game truly doesn't stick the landing on is its tone. Like, it's not half as dark as Majora's Mask, but it tries really hard to be. It feels more like a quick response to everyone's initial hatred of Wind Waker than it does like a fully realized Zelda game. Like, when Nintendo heard everyone complaining about the cel-shaded art style in Wind Waker, they got together and were like, quick, let's make Scenester Link and Emo Zelda, and we'll make it all dark and gray and boring. At number 8, I've got A Link to the Past. Like, I know it's a great game, up there with like the greatest SNES games with like Super Metroid and Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana and Earthbound and stuff. I like A Link to the Past. I just don't love A Link to the Past. And I think the reason I don't love A Link to the Past is the same reason I don't love Zelda 1 or Zelda 2. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. I actually love this game. And that's just because, due to the graphical capabilities back then, there's really very little variation in the dungeons. It's kind of just like different colors in each dungeon. They all do start to kind of look the same. It doesn't help that there are so fucking many of them in A Link to the Past. Like, if I made a top 10 Zelda dungeon list, I don't think a single dungeon in A Link to the Past would be on it, because none of them stick out in my mind. Like, I know they're all designed well and they're clever and the puzzles are good, but for me, they're just not as immersive as like really well themed dungeons. I think the benchmark for this is set by games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I do really enjoy this game, but it's not gonna end up on the very top of my list. At number 7, I've got A Link Between Worlds. Because A Link Between Worlds has the same overworld for the most part as A Link to the Past, I had my reservations going into this game, but it didn't disappoint. Not only did it make all of the dungeons like really unique and give them their own themes and such, but the weapon rental system and the core mechanic of the game turning into a painting, that together with the 3D elements of the 3DS, so you can get all of that depth from each of the dungeons. For me, it kind of felt that there was like an amount of freedom in this game that most other Zelda games just couldn't come close to. It's just so great. I loved this game. I absolutely adored this game. Number 6 on my list is Wind Waker. Wind Waker had come out at a time that I had pretty much given up on gaming aside from like a handful of rounds of Smash Bros. Melee with some friends. So I didn't actually play this game on the GameCube when it was released, but I did play the HD remaster on the Wii U. And it's kind of remarkable to me just how wrong everyone was about the cel-shaded art style. If you look at Wind Waker HD and you look at Twilight Princess HD, it's not even a competition which one looks better. Wind Waker holds up so much better than Twilight Princess in terms of its graphics and its charm. But where Wind Waker truly shines is in its characters. You've got scrappy little Link and his cute little sister. You've got shifty Tetra, who's fucking awesome. You've got the baddest, meanest, yet also somehow most understandable Ganondorf. And look at how expressive they all are. I mean, like, look at Link in this game. And then look at whatever this is. At number 5, I have Link's Awakening. Now, I have a special place in my heart for this game because this is the first Zelda game I ever played and beat when I was a kid. Because what is not to love about spending my second grade recess time absorbed in the world of Legend of Zelda rather than trying to associate with my peers? I remember trying to convince my 2 older brothers, who were at that time playing A Link to the Past on the SNES, that Link's Awakening is in fact an amazing Zelda game, but neither of them really believed me. They were like, yeah, well, how could it be as good if it's on the Game Boy Color? And I was like, because it is, man. It's so great. And I just finished up the remake on the Switch. Every single thing in the remake was faithful to the original, but revamped with beautiful graphics and a beautiful score, and everything about it was kind of perfect to me. The only thing I wish is that it were longer so I could get lost in the world for even more time. Number 4 on my list is Ocarina of Time. This game really needs very little explanation. I'm one of the sheep who grew up playing this game and loving this game, and I'm not really gonna apologize for that. I know it's kind of like a popular thing to hate on this game now, but I'm not sure why. Perhaps it's just to have an unpopular opinion. But for me, there's pretty much nothing not to love about this game. Like, the dungeons fucking kill me. They're so perfectly themed. The towns are amazing. Kakariko's great. Goron Village is great. Zora's Domain is great. The characters are fun. It's just a good game. Like, it's just a good game. And I can play it over and over and over again and still remember why I love it, and not find anything as an adult that I hate about it. Number 3 on my list is Majora's Mask. Now, let me start this one by saying I'm talking about the 3D remake of Majora's Mask. There were a lot of problems with the N64 version that made it so, while I loved it as a child, it still didn't hold a candle up to Ocarina of Time. But the 3D remake made everything work perfectly. For example, the time mechanic. In the original N64 version, time just kind of lumbered on slowly enough to where you could complete a dungeon by, like, dawn of the second day, and there was really never any threat to time passing. There was really never any time limit. It passed by so slowly. In the 3D remake, they made it so time passes by a lot faster. And frankly, there's nothing more ass-clenchingly nerve-wracking than trying to finish the end of a dungeon in Majora's Mask 3D while the final hours music is playing and the timer is ticking down and you have no idea whether or not you're gonna have to fucking start over. It just makes the whole game so much more exciting. It makes it so there's a constant threat in the back of your mind, and much like the tone of the game, feels very unsettling. I feel like the 3D remake changed the time mechanic from a gimmick to something that really does affect the game. And lastly, the 3D remake has the Bomber's Notebook that actually makes a difference in your game, and the bombers are kick-ass little kids who like really want to make a difference in the world, where in the N64 version they just kind of run around being assholes. I can't argue enough that the 3D version is the definitive version of this game. At number 2, I have Skyward Sword. I know a lot of people are going to think that like I'm putting Skyward Sword so high on my list just to have an unpopular opinion or just to make people angry, but I don't really care about making people angry. That's like not my thing. I put it so high on my list because I actually fucking love this game. Now don't get me wrong, I know Skyward Sword is an imperfect game. I know that there are things that I would love to see changed for an HD remake, but none of this game's imperfections kept me from loving it. Remember at the beginning of the video when I mentioned that story in a video game is really important for me to feel immersed in the video game and for me to feel like what I'm doing is important? Skyward Sword is the best example of this. It's got some of the best character development and the best story in the entire series. So let's take, for example, Zelda. In almost every single game prior, except for Wind Waker, she just kind of fills this placeholder of like damsel in distress. And
Who fucking cares?
like, why do I give a shit? In Skyward Sword, the first 2.5 hours of the game are devoted to building this really beautiful relationship between you and Zelda. So when she inevitably disappears, it fucking matters. And you have a reason to go on your adventure. And then for you to find out later that she's not even in that much trouble because she's in the very capable hands of the best Impa in the series, and they're both doing badass things to like fulfill her destiny and shit, and you're kind of unneeded, it all makes you kind of want to fight harder to be needed. It's all just good storytelling. If this game gave the option of classic controls and made it so you didn't have to fight the imprisoned 3 times, then there'd be a whole lot more people who stop shitting on this game and start loving this game for like the fucking classic that it is. But as it is now, we'll have to wait for a fucking HD remake, Nintendo. And obviously number 1 on my list is Breath of the Wild. Now, I don't think Breath of the Wild is a perfect game. There are things that I wish they kept from the traditional formulaic Zelda franchise. But Breath of the Wild hit the reset button and gave us the perfect jumping off point for a perfect Zelda game. A game that they can give us slightly more unique dungeons and maybe some items that don't break. But there was never a moment when I played this game that I felt like I wanted more, or that I was being deprived of something. The characters are fucking unbelievable. The voice acting in Japanese is unbelievable. The voice acting in English is subpar. There's no better example of like the classic towns of all the different races in the game than the ones in Breath of the Wild. A lot of the side characters are so perfect, like Sidon, and I think Rivali is fucking sick and misunderstood, but you know, fight me. That's just unpopular opinion number... What are we on now? I'll probably make a video on things that I would love to see in Breath of the Wild 2, but we'll see. So there it is. That's all of the Zelda games ranked from worst to best, in my personal opinion. There's only one game in the entire franchise that I didn't complete, and that's Four Swords. And I'll get around to it. It'll happen someday. Maybe. We'll see. I think I have to. Let me know what your list looks like in the comments. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see more Zelda videos or more videos like this. I would love to make them if you're interested in watching them. But if you're not interested in watching them, then who fucking knows what I'll do? Maybe nothing. Maybe I'll just stop.